H2Vinyl community, music lovers, and anyone else who just happened to stumble upon this video. Welcome to Tone and Grooves. My name is Jeff, and what you're watching right now is going to be my entry into a contest that's being run right now by Brad at H2Vinyl, and I want to make sure I get all that right. Brad at H2Vinyl, who's doing a contest where he is asking us to share a 5-minute story about falling in love with music. And then if you do a second 5 minutes at least, part 2 kind of a thing, he'll enter you in twice. Really kind of cool contest, and this got me immediately excited because as I thought about and watched Brad's video, Brad, really cool video. I really enjoyed that with the NWA and the hip-hop records, and really appreciated the, what'd you call it, the laser drops and whatnot. I mean, that was just really cool. Good stuff. And as I watched that video and kind of got the gist of what Brad's talking about, I immediately thought about my discovery of a particular genre of music and how I just immediately fell in love with that. Just went, I mean, like fell head over heels in love with that genre and just went nuts. Like, I mean, entered into a whole new like world of this music, and you know, a whole new phase of collecting, and how that has really just expanded into not only different formats like CD and vinyl and whatnot, but even slightly different genres and eras of music. And I mean, it's just really kind of become, it was like opening a door into a whole new world. And so that's the story I'm going to tell, and I think I'm going to try to do 2 parts. This first part is telling the story of my discovery and falling in love with the genre of big band jazz, you know, swing music. This was mid-90s. Got to check the time because Brad said 5 minutes, not including the intro, like actually telling the story. Okay, so this is mid-90s. At the time, I was working at Camelot Music at the record store in Daytona Beach, Florida. I was working there, was the assistant manager there, and we had a gentleman there working on our staff by the name of Hans. Hans was an older gentleman. He was recently retired. I mean, probably in his 60s. That's not old, but, you know, for me at the time, you know, being like 20 years old or whatever, you know, 60 seemed pretty old. You know, and my thing was Prince, was just getting into, you know, like, alternative rock, you know, 9 Inch Nails and things like that. The Cure, those were kind of new discoveries for me. And we really knew nothing at that point about jazz, and certainly nothing about big band or swing music, any of that kind of thing. So anyway, kind of got ahead of myself a little bit. So this was mid-90s, like 93, 94, and I watched the movie called Swing Kids, which came out in 1993. I'm just going to get my phone here because make sure I got the all the information. I have the DVD downstairs, but it's not in a case. I have all my DVDs in a little shoebox and whatnot, so nothing really to show. The movie's called Swing Kids, and it actually has a very young Christian Bale in it. Robert Sean Leonard's in it. Frank Whaley's in it. Barbara Hershey, and it's all around the story of these, you know, these kids, teenagers, or you know, 20-something kids in Nazi Germany. As Hitler is coming to power, and you know, the rise of the Nazi Party is going on, so that's part of the story. And then, but they're part of this kind of countercultural movement, if you will, this kind of underground music movement or culture. These kids, they all listen to American big band swing music, and they dress in like British, you know, British style clothes from the era. You know, suits and ties, and you know, kind of like, so embracing this whole Western kind of musical culture is, and it's kind of like their story of like that's their like that's their fighting back against Nazi Germany and whatnot. Swing Heil is their like little phrase as they would like do this, and so anyway, watch this movie, and I love this music, and it's the movie is full of this big band jazz music. Benny Goodman, Duke Ellington. You know, Django Reinhardt. I mean, just all these classic big band jazz musicians, and I just really just was turned on by this music and was just, this is just phenomenal. Bought the soundtrack on CD, which I couldn't find. I was trying to find that for this video. Couldn't find my CD. I don't know where that is. I hope I didn't lose it somewhere. It might just be packed away. Anyway, bought the CD soundtrack, which has some of these big band jazz songs. Most of it's just the soundtrack music. But was just really enjoying listening to those big band songs off of this soundtrack, which were done by a modern band. And I wish I had the CD because I could tell you, I don't remember the name of the group, but it was not original recordings of these original songs from the 30s. It was called redone by a modern day swing unit. Anyway, so meanwhile, now we've got this guy Hans who works at Camelot Music, this older gentleman, and he was in charge of our easy listening jazz and classical sections. And Hans and I had gotten to know each other and kind of sparked a friendship because earlier to this I was interested in some classical music and knew nothing about classical music either, and had just gotten into Bach through a class at school. And Hans had invited me over to his house because, and as he said, I have a collection of music at my house, classical music. You'd be welcome to come over, and I can share some Bach with you, and classical music and whatnot, and kind of get your feet wet, so to speak. Which at the time, again, I'm like 20 years old, and I thought that was maybe a little bit odd. But I took him up on the offer and went to his house, and my gosh, I mean, the phrase "I have a bit of a collection" was like the understatement of the year. Hans had thousands of albums, vinyl, CDs, cassettes. He had everything perfectly categorized and organized. He had it all, detailed, like lists and, everything just categorized and in books. He was not a computer guy. He was against the computer. He was not going to use software or computer to inventory his collections. He had everything typed out and in all these sheets and 3-ring binders. Every vinyl, he would number the spine of all his vinyl records, number the spines of all his CDs, his cassettes, so he could go into his 3-ring binder and see. He could look up, if you could ask, do you have this song? And he could go into his books, his notebooks, and look up the song title, tell you not only what song, if he had that song, but like multiple versions of the same song by different artists, performed by different artists, like classical pieces, say Mozart's, a Mozart symphony or Beethoven symphony. He could tell you, I have that symphony and I have it performed, by this orchestra, this symphony, and this symphony, and this symphony, and it's on this CD, and but he did all this by hand with a typewriter. I mean, it was amazing. Huge, vast collection. So I had been, at his house listening to classical music and being introduced to Bach and then Mozart and Beethoven and a bunch of different classical composers through these listening sessions. Meanwhile, so now we're in the middle of one of these listening sessions, and I just happened to mention that had watched this movie, Swing Kids, and really liked the music, and mentioned Benny Goodman. It was, I still have the memory, the look on Hans's face. I mean, it was like I had literally just opened up a door to a whole new world, and he just was more than willing to take me through that door and into that world. I mean, he literally just got excited, and it was like, oh my, Benny Goodman. Oh, and it, like, immediately classical music got shut down. He says, do I have Benny Goodman? Yes, I have Benny Goodman. Hans loved classical music, but I honestly think that big band jazz was his first love. The man had a huge, vast collection, LPs and CDs, of big band jazz music, and we would get together, and he would just started like opening up this world of big band jazz music to me, starting with Benny Goodman. And it was just so much fun. I mean, and I immediately just fell, like I said, head over heels in love with this music. It just so happened right about that same time, we at the store, thanks to Hans, because he had discovered this and was ordering these things in for us to have in our inventory at the store. There's this label called chronological classics or classics records. They would do the chronological classics, and it was all reissues on CD of the greats from the big band jazz era. Benny Goodman, Duke Ellington, I mean, you name it. All of these greats, the Dorsey brothers, all of them. And they would, the CDs would be the reissues of all of, like the music from the original 78s, all in chronological order. And Hans was ordering these in, and he was collecting these himself. And so it was like perfect timing for me to get introduced to all of this. So I immediately started buying Benny Goodman, things like The Birth of Swing, which is this is 1935 to 1936. And then all these chronological, so here's Benny Goodman and his orchestra, 1936 to 37, 1937, 1938, 38 volume 2, 38 to 39, 1940, and all of these, I mean, these have just phenomenal music, amazing music. And it immediately, of course, I mean, I'm buying all these Benny Goodman CDs, getting just completely hooked on this. Just getting completely hooked on Benny Goodman, discovering all this amazing music. And then, of course, while I'm at it, I'm discovering that, Benny Goodman, I mean, plays with it mentions all these other people. Like here you've got, Benny Goodman and his orchestra with Jack Teagarden, Tommy Dorsey, Bunny Berrigan. You've got some of the early ones. You've got with, it's mentioning all these other artists that Benny Goodman was playing with. And of course, come to find out that, so many of these people like Benny Goodman, like Glenn Miller, like the Dorsey brothers, these big names in big band jazz, they started off as sidemen playing, with other groups and with other artists. So as I go back in time now, I'm buying things like, well, first I started getting things like Gene Krupa, who played drums for Benny Goodman. But he split off at one point and started his own orchestra. So buying people who played with Benny Goodman. But then also discovering, like I said, that people like Benny Goodman played with these other bands and these other artists. So then getting CDs like, here's Benny Goodman and Jack Teagarden. Jack Teagarden being a phenomenal early trombone player. And these are tracks of them playing with Red Nichols, with Irving Mills, Joe Venuti and Eddie Lang, and Adrian Rollini. So I immediately, and here's another one with, Benny Goodman playing with Ben Pollack, with Red Nichols, with Ted Lewis, So discovering through Benny Goodman these other, now this isn't necessarily big band swing anymore, this is like early jazz, Red Nichols and his Five Pennies, Adrian Rollini. So that led me to, of course, then I'm like, that's super cool. I want to hear these other recordings by these other artists that Benny Goodman played with, which led to, picking up things like Red Nichols, this is the complete Brunswick recordings of Red Nichols, Ben Pollack. This isn't even jazz. This is like, like 20s pop music. Some of it's kind of jazzy, but anyway, in discovering this stuff, Adrian Rollini, which as I mentioned, Benny Goodman played with Adrian Rollini's orchestra, which led me then to hunt down, Adrian Rollini played baritone sax. It was, this guy played jazz, big band jazz music on baritone sax. It is absolutely amazing. So, leads me to here, CDs with Adrian Rollini. Here's Adrian Rollini and the Golden Gate Orchestra, 1924 to 1927, featuring Red Nichols, the Dorsey brothers, so things like this. Adrian Rollini again, and of course now, further down the line, Adrian Rollini also played as a sideman in groups like the University Six, the Little Ramblers, the Goofus Five. So now I'm discovering, all this early jazz music from the 20s and even into the teens. And as happens to be with my personality, I'm always very interested in the origins of things. How did things start? And always kind of history is a passion of mine. So always kind of wanting to discover the earliest the beginnings, the roots of things, the earliest history of things, which led me then to I'm loving this big band jazz, this early jazz. Where does this jazz start and where does it originate? Which led me to things like picking up CDs by the original Dixieland Jazz Band, King Oliver, and just early jazz, and even getting into ragtime music. It literally just opened a whole new world of music to me. And as I've gone back, picking up things on vinyl. Let's see here. Awesome, just awesome stuff like Duke Ellington with the Blanton Webster Band. Of course, Benny Goodman. I mean, I just love Benny Goodman. So to be able to pick up things, Benny Goodman albums, Benny and Brussels, and learning that some of these, of course, all of this music was originally released on 78, and so you had these specialty labels like Sunbeam that would release, early broadcast recordings, or I think I've got some more in here. Yeah, here we go. Like Sunbeam in a Mellow Tone. These would be reissues of Benny Goodman stuff that was on early 78s. This is stuff from 1931, Benny Goodman and his orchestra. Or they would do albums of Benny Goodman as a sideman. So just learning about reissues and where all this music actually came from, and discovering these kind of independent labels that would do all these reissues. Just getting into, and of course just expanding it. My love of big band just went in all kinds of crazy directions. So discovering other artists like, here we go, Woody Herman. I love Woody Herman, clarinet player, just fantastic. Jazz. Harry James. This is actually an audiophile label, Sheffield Lab. I mean, these albums just sound these are later recordings, much later, like the 70s. But Harry James, man, on these just phenomenal big band jazz stuff. I mean, so it just got me into, like Harry James, Stan Kenton. Love Stan Kenton. Stan Kenton from the Tropicana, Kenton and Hi-Fi. And of course, discovering Stan Kenton led to, discovering like the singers, like June Christy that sang with Stan Kenton. So, this one movie, Swing Kids, and discovering Benny Goodman, I mean, opened up literally a door to a whole new world of music that I had never experienced before. And leading to things like not just big band jazz, but also early jazz, the origins of jazz, more Dixieland style jazz. I've got a whole bunch of albums here of Dixieland style jazz, and even into vocalists like June Christy and Irene Day and or Doris Day, and just because they sang, these vocalists sang with these big bands in the 30s and 40s, and then went on to do things like Frank Sinatra. I mean, Frank Sinatra started with the Dorsey Band. So it just literally opened up this whole new world and a love of this type of music that I just went head over heels and gaga for. And still love it, still enjoy it. It's just amazing. And I suppose the crazy thing is there's so many rabbit holes with this, so many rabbit trails that go off in all kinds of different directions, because some of these these people had their own bands, but they played as sidemen, and then the artists that played with them. I mean, it just goes on and on forever, and it's so much fun and so amazing. What's interesting, and this will be like I guess maybe the little teaser for part 2, is that so much of that music, the music from obviously from the teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, all released on 78s. So the CDs and the LPs of the music from those eras, I mean, it's all reissues. So they've transferred the music from the 78s because there were no master tapes. They have the 78, so they literally record the 78 and make a recording of that and put that on the LP or on the CD. And I always had told myself, you know, this is it. I'm only going this far. I will do the LPs and the CD reissues. I am not going to go back and try to hunt down these original 78s from the 40s, the 30s, the 20s, and earlier. I'm not going to go there. Well, maybe I stuck to my word, maybe I didn't. That will be in part 2. Anyway, man, so thank you so much for watching. Thanks for listening this long to this story, which is well more than 5 minutes. But man, when you get on something like this, it's your passion and something that you just love. You can't help but talk about it. It could go on and on and on about this. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Brad, thank you for the contest. Really great idea and so much fun. Appreciate your channel. Been diving in more and more in your videos, and just, you know, thanks for doing the contest, and thank you everyone for watching. Please drop some comments down below. I love the interaction. That's what makes this so, you know, really so much more fun and makes it all worthwhile, is to have the interaction with you guys, the comments, and just, you know, chiming in and the back and forth. I love that. And of course, always, you know, thank you for subscriptions. That too is much appreciated and fantastic. Thank you so much. And until next time, stay in the groove.